our natural environment can tell us a lot about what's happening that we may not be aware of. I think the collective conscious around what ceremony is so important right now, not just with our environment, but who we are as people. We most desperately need to be the storytellers of our experience. We have the ability to be able to connect and communicate and translate the changes that are happening, and also our just deep love for each other and the earth that we're in. That's the power of art, that it can transcend time, place, and it can also transcend us as a people. And that's why it can be so incredibly powerful.
Art can be powerful and is the tool that we explore to understand our sense of self and our identity. A gorgeous postcard and spotlight of the extraordinary, the wonderful, my dear friend, Nicole Forshoe, for ceremony. Nicole's a Wiradjuri artist and has been chosen to present the final chapter in the Giraba project, the creative partnership with esteemed Gitcha artists of the late Bulanjali Gali that explores the concepts of body and earth and the strong power of objects and our relationship with them. Recent works by Forshoe are presented alongside the exhibition of Bulanjali and reflecting the profound friendship that she has developed during Forshoe's tenure with the gallery coordinator of the Wirraman Art Centre in Western Australia. And we pay our deep respects to the Gitcha people. Between the periods of 2016 and 2017, and has continued the Bulanjali's passings throughout 2018. The connection between the works speaks of the importance of intergenerational and intercultural collaborations between our First Nations language groups and clan groups. Just recently, we've just lost a really significant member of the First Nations cultural arts industry, and I have been asked to share a moment of silence out of respect for this person's passing. So if you join me, let's just take a moment to reflect. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Joel Spring. Joel, another proud Wiradjuri person, is raised between Gadigal in Redfern in New South Wales and Napanju in Alice Springs, Northern Territory, Australia. Joel is the co-director of with Genevieve Zoe Murray of Future Method Studio, a collaborative and interdisciplinary artist and practice working between architecture, installation, and speculative projects. At present, Joel's work explores the consistent narratives of Sydney and Australia's urban cultures and Aboriginal histories in the context of an ongoing colonisation. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Joel, who is beaming in from us from the beautiful Gadigal country. Joel, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to hand it over to you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I am streaming to you from the unceded lands of the Wongal and the Gadigal people here of the Eora Nation, who have practiced their sovereignty on this land, commonly known as Sydney, since the first sunrise. I'd like to acknowledge their endless and continuous care for the country that I was born on, and so pay my respects to the Gadigal, Wongal people, the people of the Eora Nation, and their ancestors in their struggles through frontier wars, and their elders present and future. It is upon their lands that I undertake my work as an artist, as a designer, and a researcher. And these are stolen lands for which treaty or sovereign agreement has never been negotiated. So my name is Joel Sherwood Spring. I'm a Wiradjuri anti-disciplinary artist, and I work mainly collaboratively on projects that sort of sit outside of the kind of notions of contemporary art and architecture. I'm trained as an architect. And I work through these means in attempting to transfigure the spatial dynamics of power that we experience here in colonial Australia through discourse, pedagogies, art, design, and architectural practice. And as stated, I have a particular focus at the moment in the context that I have been brought up in, which is the city of Sydney on Gadigal country, and thinking about the Australia's urban culture and the Indigenous histories in face of ongoing colonisation. But before I talk, before I go into talking about the work that features here in ceremony, I want to frame my practice and probably the reason why it's here, right? That being a part of the ceremony artist group and exhibition within a larger framework in which I am negotiating and learning how to employ art making and exhibitionary practices, publication, discourse, and pedagogy within what is largely recognised in the kind of international community as Black or Indigenous studies. I'm in attempting to explore the potential of an Indigenous materialist reading of art and architecture towards the efforts of repatriation, reparations, and land back. So the image you see before you is a photo that I took at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, down on Yuin country, just after the devastating fires that rolled along the eastern seaboard of what we call New South Wales. I was visiting on a research trip that I had taken as a part of the architecture faculty where I work and studied at UTS in Sydney, and going to meet with community members, thinking of possible alternatives and ways to talk through and think about how to rebuild and how to live in relationship to this country post the bushfires. While I was down there, I connected with a community residential community known as Rosedale, but also the local Aboriginal Land Council, so Mogo Land Council down on Yuin country. We spoke a lot about the effects of the fire and the sort of implications that would have not only in rebuilding housing communities, right, but also the sort of existential kind of questions around the loss of ecosystems, loss of biodiversity, and loss of natural life. It's quite a profound and distinct image, right? There's a sense of absence in these settings. And in sort of beginning to mediate a lot of conversations around these experiences, people losing their homes, and for Indigenous mob, for Yuin mob down on that country, you know, losing country in a way, losing the life on that country in a lot of ways, the systems that are inherent in it. One of the most kind of profound observations outside of not only, you know, the loss of homes and many other things, but was the profound sense of absence. But this is a shared absence. You know, this isn't just the absence of someone's particular property, absence of someone's favorite spot to go listen to the birds, right? This is a larger sense of loss and a profound sense of absence and silence. One of the kind of most impactful ways we found to sort of begin to talk and communicate about the sort of what was lost and what was shared in that loss across cultural boundaries between settler Australians and Indigenous mob was this loss of biodiversity and the loss of an ecosystem. Here in this image, you can see on the left side a video and an audio recording that I had taken on burnt country, just around near Rosedale. And to the right, an image taken in unburnt country, very similar, about 20 kilometres north. But the images below the videos taken on my phone are what we call a spectrograph. This is a visual representation of the frequencies within the sound recording. And it is within that image, within that visualization, that you can see the sheer kind of breadth and depth of the absence, right? On one side, you see almost no sound. And to the right, on the unburnt country, you see, a plethora of biodiversity, be those birds, the sounds of wind brushing through the leaves. And throughout my own practice, along many other projects, I have been interested in exploring these ideas of absence, the sense of silence in the wake of ongoing colonisation experienced by many Indigenous people across this continent in many different countries, right? Be this the absence of a language, the absence of family, at times the absence of ceremony, and the absence of story, right? And for me, that absence or that silence is a thing, right? It sits in place of something that we knew could be there and could be there again. So in that sense, this silence is not an absence as in nothing. It is in of itself an object, and it is something that I think a lot of Indigenous people are continually experiencing, right? But there's something to be said about absence, right? The relevance of taking a moment's silence to acknowledge those who are not with us is not a unique ritual among many cultures, as we've just experienced, but it is felt and observed across the globe. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that within that moment that we take to be silent, we are witnessing that the moment that we exist in is a product, or I would say even a gift, of our past generations and our ancestors, right? There are important rituals that we need to observe in order to care for our dead. For Indigenous people, proper ceremony surrounding death, burial, cremation is a matter of reproductive justice, because death does not mean the absence of life, right? An absent family member becomes an ancestor with who the bereaved may remain in contact. Here it is the ancestors who are the true owners of the land, and this is the reason why disempowering the dead was and still is so important to the implementation of extractive practices and modes of production all around the world, right? Disempowering our ancestors. It's kind of the colonial aims, right? So through examining this sense of absence felt within a landscape, this is a much larger existential kind of reflection on the absence of the noise of an ecosystem, the sound of country. We began to take recordings in and around these communities and creating these documents that would help visualize those things, right? Because it's not always easy to get someone to listen to silence, but if you can find a visual representation that begins to articulate some of these things, it becomes a point of contact, a point to talk about what it is that is missing from these places, and maybe setting up a conversation of how we might try to bring those things back and what that looks like, right? So these spectrographs show kind of what I was just stating before, but these are kind of longer field recordings that I was beginning to take. And this was all the preliminary research that was going into the project that has come to manifest itself within ceremony, in the NGA galleries as a set of sculptures. So as you can see here, you know, quite literally, visually, within the first image at the top here, we are listening to silence. We might not be able to hear it, but we're observing it. And what is implied by this absence of sound, be it a voice, an ecosystem, or a language that contains them, I think opens up avenues for other inaudible, untold, unheard stories and counter narratives, right? Here is a representation, a 3D scan taken of the headland down at Rosedale. From the bottom, you see the recording of the burnt country, and then the scan taken just post the bushfires. The image above, the recording of unburnt country, and then the same headland about a year earlier. So you're getting a scan of the canopy of the trees, right? So this is the sheer like breadth of what is lost just within a very small area of that country that was burnt. And this was the beginning of kind of crafting a set of ideas or a set of moments where we would think about how, as a community, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, within the context of Rosedale, particular projects, particular methodologies could come into practice around, or even particular rituals, or maybe even ceremony, could come in to help this community come back and maybe learn from these fires, you know. And there's a tension within that, right? Because there is a large settler community, people who have lived on that land maybe 70 years, maybe longer. And the problem is, right, is after those fires, you know, it's devastating. You've lost all these trees, you've lost all this biodiversity. But the truth is, and this is talking to Mogo Land Council and other traditional fire practitioners, is that country was not healthy. That's why it burnt that way, right? In a sense, that fire was not the events, not the product of a year's worth of drought. It was the product of 250 years of systemic neglect, right? We understand that Indigenous people have practiced care and cultivated the landscape in what we could only call a 500 to 700 generation long design project coordinated across the entirety of this continent through many means, which one of only is traditional fire management. So there are practices that need to be brought back, ceremonies that need to be re-engaged with, and we need to support those processes. And so the tension, right, is there is a community of people who own the property, and then there is the traditional owners, or there is the Mogo Land Council or other people who want to see that place be healthy. And often the ideals, maybe in the symbolic ideas, they're similar, but when it comes down to the practice of what is necessary to make this place healthy again, that often breaches the boundaries of what a property owner in this particular community would see as safe or helpful, right? So it's also trying to think about opportunities to engage in education around these fire management and these other practices. Because one of the interesting bits of information that came out of my time there talking to Mogo Land Council and other fire practitioners is that the thing that needs to happen after a fire like this is you need to cut down trees, right? You need to start clearing. You need to start removing trees from the landscape, because for 70 years of even growth, you get a canopy that creates a lot of leaf litter. So you need to open up that canopy, right? You need to let light in. You need to let multi-generational growth. You need to let other trees, other saplings grow so that you get the sheer level of biodiversity in the healthy landscape that doesn't burn in the way that we saw in 2019 and 2020. So it then became the task of what kind of process could be facilitated through the commission of the NGA to make this work? What sort of project? I come from a built environment background, so I'm very interested not only in the objects, the products, the buildings that come out of a process, but the processes themselves, right? Construction processes, material choices, the things that are invisibilized from the end product in some capacity, but are very much a part of it. And for me, it became an opportunity to figure out a way to direct resources from the NGA towards communities, particularly within Yuin country, to clear trees, right? And then the sculptures are this material outcome, this artifacts, this thing that comes from supporting this traditional practice in some capacity. So supporting community members to cut down trees or to clear country, and then having those trees brought to me or brought to where I was working. I was very fortunate enough at the beginning of this year to have a space down in Ngunnawal country to make this work. And building the sculptures using these trees, using these limbs and other materials to kind of bring a sort of a material reality to this sense of absence and loss to kind of communicate these ideas, right? So what we did is we collected many limbs and many long tree trunks from all around Yuin country, and we brought them back to the site that I was working at on Ngunnawal country, and we decided to cut them to length, or some of them were already cut to length, and we placed them in formwork. You know, my construction education is one of architecture, and there's also a particular contextual relationship to prefabricated concrete within the institutional architectural language of Canberra and its history. Especially within the 1960s, a lot of off-form and prefabricated concrete was poured to create the buildings, not only the NGA, but lots of other institutional spaces on unceded Ngunnawal country. And so we took these trees and we began to place them into the cements to set them with the intention of then taking to these and burning them. So through engaging in the process, similar to that is what is necessary in burning to keep country safe and to keep country healthy. We thought that, or I thought that it was an interesting and quite a beautiful thing to apply that same process, which is kind of brings up the title of the work. So the work itself is untitled, but if it had to have a title, I would call it Wingara, which is a Wiradjuri word which means listen, to think and to reflect. But in Wiradjuri language and many other languages within southeast of the continent we call Australia, the word win means fire. So Wingara has the word fire in it. And actually a lot of words that have something to say about reflecting, listening, learning, share this root word of win, which is an interesting insight, you know, it makes sense spatially. So listening, sharing stories, reflecting is something that might happen around a campfire, right? But to think about fire, fire practicing, fire, cultural burning, cool burning, fire in its application as listening to country, listening to the land and learning from it is something that is, for me, endlessly amazing to think about because that's a philosophy there, right? That's a particular Wiradjuri or Southeast philosophy in relationship to a particular practice and how embedded it is within speaking to and learning from and relating to country, right? So burning these timbers out is also a way to reflect. It's a way to learn. It's also a way to create these things that I think are in and of themselves gestures and artifacts of an event so that we don't forget it, but also that we can learn from it and learn about the things that we can do to not see these things happen again. And because, you know, within and of itself, it's also a gesture towards trying to make physical a sense of absence, right? These impressions that are left in the concrete show the image of the trees, show what is missing from that landscape now, right? And so there's this language being spoken in a tectonic sense, these massive concrete slabs, they're about 2.5 meters tall, that speak to the institutional language of the NGA, but also many other buildings that were built in the 1960s on Ngunnawal country, but using a particular practice in which we take the necessary materials from country, things that need to be cleared, and make something productive with it. Facilitating a process, but also creating objects that I think we can learn something from and be reflective with. And in and of itself, help us not to forget, right? Because that's the thing. I think, especially within a Western context, we have a particular attitude to the way that we experience, I think, traumatic experiences, which makes a lot of sense, right? We'd rather forget it. But I think in the state of things in which they are now, we can't forget, right? And we've got to be reflective, and we've got to listen. We've got to listen to country. We've got to listen to the stories that country has, even when it's silent, right? Because, like I said before, that silence might be an absence, but that absence isn't nothing, right? It speaks to and it points to the absence of something that was there, something that could come back, and something that needs to be heard, right? So I guess kind of stemming off that point, you know, it sort of sits in relationship or in critique of sort of colonial models of coexistence that are sort of kind of predicated on kind of a pretty rigid distinction between life and death, between living and non-living. And, you know, we could say 250 years ago, these models clashed with a very different set of extended reproductive structures whereby ancestors' ceremony is co-present with the living, and where to care for the dead is to care for the environment. In other words, colonialism clashed with a radically different form of environmental architecture. So if fire, you know, in our experiences in the last couple of years, has become the main topic of disputes between radically different modes of coexistence, a dispute that is, of course, over what the fire is in the first place, right? Is it a destructive force, or is it a tool for maintenance? Is it a form of care? Is it a way that we could learn? And that's the questions sort of raised up in the work, and the things that I'm still interested in exploring and continually trying to explore within my own practice. I don't know exactly how I'm doing for time, but that's where I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you so much for listening.
What a wonderful presentation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
Gotta love those Wiradjuri mob art. They obviously know what they're doing.
That's for sure.
Well, look, Joel, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And just as country is unique to its own environment, Joel reminds us so too are the impacts of colonized, occupied, controlled countries and lands. The biodiversity that makes and made country is a result of the totemic events that came before us and will continue after us. The biodiversity of country creates its unique cultural expressions, its story, its song, its dance. And when we put ourselves within any of these places, we are making a dreaming mobile. Thank you for reminding us of that, Joel. You have done just an extraordinary job.
Yeah.
And so too is our ways of making leaders. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways and our way of making leaders is the oldest ways of creating leaders in the known world. There is something about how we prepare and future ready our youth that has made sure that the maintenance of our cultural expressions that enables our connection to our ancestral sense of our place is there. I have the deep privilege of working at the National Gallery of Australia and with the guidance of the wonderful Bruce Johnson McLean from the Weird People as the Assistant Director of Indigenous Engagement at the Gallery. Bruce is a wonderful leader for our people and a wonderful mentor through the development of the current evolution of the National Gallery's Indigenous Arts Leadership Program. The National Gallery of Australia's Indigenous Arts Leadership Program is supported by our partners Wesfarmers Arts, and throughout its 13-year tenure has had over 110 alumni be involved in this wonderful capacity building and sector leading program. Just recently, the program underwent a national consultation, meeting with as many as we possibly could, alumni, cultural practitioners and arts workers, asking them, what does leadership mean to you? And what does this program mean to you? To future ready and to safeguard this program. This has seen an evolution of the program in which the program now has a on-site component, residential 1, and a on-country component, residential 1. And then see if she help me out. And then our on-site component in Ngunnawal country and Ngambri at the National Gallery of Australia. Auntie Mary Atkinson is the inaugural elder of the National Gallery's Indigenous Arts Leadership Program, and she culturally negotiates our participants in a culturally informed way between those two countries of Wiradjuri and Ngunnawal. Auntie, would you like to talk about the program?
That was Joel that just presented, wasn't it?
Yep.
And that was fantastic because like our first residential is about making those deep connections on country where we need to immerse ourselves and have that cultural connection to our cultures and our heritage before we come into the second residential, which is here on my other country, Ngunnawal country, and then we learn about what happens within inside the building. But first we get ourselves deep enriched in our hearts. We listen to country. As Joel was saying before, that is a very, very important part of the program. And also like the participants are very respectful. They come from all over the place. They are very, they have great expectations and are very much educated in their genres and in their what they can bring as leaders to us. But they also carry, Ian, a great responsibility for our communities.
Yep.
And that's what I try to talk to them when they are on country and I'm holding those cultural safe places, that you're here because you're a reason to be here, to lead for our people in our country and our communities and to highlight how talented you are. But they do that very well on country and they are respectful. And the program, you'll see the video anyway. You'll probably see me being silly on there.
Hey, don't matter. Gorgeous.
But yeah, anyway, so so the program itself, I'm so excited about it. This is probably the second year now that I've been a part of the program as well. And just to see, like, you've heard from the beautiful Crystal, who was a participant last year, and it just, just healed my heart and made me feel so proud. It was like my granddaughter's shining out there like a star, So yeah, it just makes you feel so proud when you see our young ones leading the way. But you'll see we're doing a clip, are we?
We're doing a clip.
Yeah.
But just before we do, our young ones are only leading the way because we've had people like you and our old ones to make sure that our culture is there. And deep respects to any elders out there and all of our allies who are helping us future ready our culture. I was so overwhelmed with the Māori presentation and how she was recruiting our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters to safeguard and to prepare. We need to prepare. If we listen, if we go to that deep listening that has been echoed throughout Hetty Perkins and Crystal's presentation and our Māori sister and Joel Spring, we can find a curiosity, and that is foundational to all good education, don't matter what culture you're from. I just wanted to note Yinjamara. Auntie, could you just quickly run us through Yinjamara?
Well, Yinjamara is from my dad's clan people, Wiradjuri people, but I could say that we could all use this. Yinjamara is what we say, we have respect for ourselves, we have respect for others, we have respect for our environment that's around us, how we treat our environment, how we look after it, and we go gently, we do things politely, and we go slowly, we don't rush. So it's about that time as well. So, and we look after each other because we need to look after each other, because if we don't look after each other and the world around us, there'll be nothing. We can't help others, can we? So that's Yinjamara. But Annie Elaine, who's another elder that talks to us about the Yinjamara. and but she does that really well.
She does. And Yinjamara underpins everything that is Wiradjuri, as Auntie Elaine P. Lomez explores. And the reason why I bring up Yinjamara before we show you this video clip is that the Wiradjuri have gifted us through Residential 1 the philosophy and the practice, if you will, of Yinjamara. We are gifted a message stick, and the participants take this message stick with them throughout the journey of Residential 1, taking with them the responsibility to Yinjamara. So it is our deep pleasure on behalf of Auntie Mary Atkinson and myself and the National Gallery and our partners West Farmers Arts to share with you the National Gallery of Australia's Indigenous Arts Leadership Program.
Mandangu.
Mandangu.
This program has become the Gallery's most significant commitment to supporting First Nations culture and arts practitioners. It asks participants to explore what leadership means to them individually and to bring that with them into the professional world. Before beginning the 2021 program, we listened to alumni, cultural practitioners and arts workers, which influence us to develop an on-country component to the program. This was the first time that the Gallery has taken the program off-site and on-country.
Providing participants of this program with a range of opportunities to engage in leadership both within the institution but also within community and on-country is really important.
Seeing the Wiradjuri experience and how leadership works in the local community here has been a very humbling experience, actually.
So leaders stand up, be proud, talk the talk, walk the walk, but don't look back, because whatever's back there is not doing nothing for you.
The teachings and learnings that we have been, privileged to be part of whilst we've been here is pretty remarkable.
The generations to come, what kind of world do we want them to live in? So I think if we start having a bit of a think about that.
I think as Indigenous people, there's few things more valuable than hearing stories from our old people. And there's something very grounding about starting the program in a way that allows us all to become comfortable and allows everybody to open up more freely, feel more culturally safe.
Learning back culture and language and all these sort of concepts of leadership and the journey that everyone's been through to get to where they are. It's just been so empowering.
Say who we are, be proud of who you are, and make sure the things of the past won't creep into what we're doing today.
This culturally immersive experience is something that can't be taught in a building.
In order for you to understand community, you need to be on the ground and listen. But it's also important for us to do that behind the scenes in the preservation and restoration and conservation around artworks, artefacts.
The second residential was held at the National Gallery, but due to the change in border restrictions across Australia, only half were able to be in attendance. This saw us having to evolve the program so that people could attend online and on-site at the National Gallery.
Being at the gallery, you get to have a sense of what it takes of leadership in the workplace and these institutions where most of us work.
Just a parade of just like really, really great people to learn from. There's so much experience.
We don't freeze paintings.
Just listening to the talk kind of allowed me to think about how I do things in my work and kind of to bring all that with me.
I feel like I'm more informed as an Indigenous person working within a government structure. I feel much more prepared now than when I first started in my role, so I'm really appreciative of everything I've learnt in this second residential. It's been really valuable to me.
I know that, our culture and our future way of life's in a good place at the moment. And the more programs like this, to be able to bring that out in our young ones is just fantastic.
The program has just been extremely beneficial. Just being with other mob in this space has been really empowering.
I'm going to take a lot of what I've learnt back into the workplace.
The exhibition it's about. I'm always proud to be a Wiradjuri man, but I'm also proud to be an Aboriginal cultural arts worker. I'm proud to be part of this program because it does incredible things.
I feel like I took everything home with me. It was all so valuable, and God, I enjoyed every moment of it. I really did.
Thank you.
There you go, Mum.
That made me so proud. I feel like a proud nan and a proud mum.
Hey, Black Don't Crack, you're not from the dreaming yet, aren't you?
Oh,
Looking
I don't know.
gorgeous.
Oh, there you go.
Look, I'm proud. I was getting emotional because we have seen such transformation in all of those participants. And on a personal note, Auntie Mary and I, when we did our debrief yesterday, wanted just to extend our deep gratitude to the whole gallery for their commitment to First Nations capacity building, to understand that culture needs to be led from, and arts needs to come from that cultural place to inform how we understand our arts. And we also wanted to note our deep thanks to Nick Mitsevich, the director of the gallery, for his continued commitment for the future evolutions of the program, and Helen Carroll with West Farmers Arts and the gallery's council, for all of their strong commitment, and of course the senior management at the gallery.
Yeah, I just love them all. They're so respectful people.
Yeah, they are. And we're deeply grateful. And we are indeed fortunate to have wonderful guidance by elders both in Wiradjuri country, and we pay deep respects to Auntie Cheryl Penrith, Uncle James Ingram, Auntie Elaine P. Lomez, Auntie Jackie Ingram, Auntie Lorraine Ty, and Auntie Joyce Hampton. And we're thinking of you. And we also pay our deep respects to Paul House, who works with us here at the National Gallery.
Yeah, I love Paul too.
It's not a one-man band.
No.
We're all working together, so we're deeply grateful to all of those people. So now I would like to introduce Narcity, who is a film, pardon me, who wasn't a film, it's a film, and it's been commissioned for the National Gallery's 4th National Indigenous Arts Triennial Ceremony. Created by artist and filmmaker Hayley Miller Baker from the Gembangiri and the Darawang peoples, Narcity is a fictional narrative that builds upon the artist's lived experience of connection to spirits and ancestors. Once the video has finished, we will take a short break for lunch. For our half-day online delegates will leave us till tomorrow morning.
That's it.
But first, we're going to watch the film, so enjoy.
alcohol. These different individuals, either a stimulant, a depressant, or an anodyne. But now I'm using anodyne. Get to the point.
I hope you all enjoyed that incredibly personal film created by Hayley Miller-Baker, really reflecting in quite an individual way about her concept of ceremony. You can read more about Hayley Miller-Baker's work in the Ceremony digital publication that I spoke about earlier today. And for those of you who are on site, you also might wish to visit the exhibition and see that work in the screening room in the centre of the show. It is a really stunning and evocative presentation that really takes us on quite a deep and dark journey. Before we finish this morning's session, I really wanted to make sure I had the opportunity to thank the extraordinary learning and digital team who've been working tirelessly to produce the National Visual Art Education Conference. In particular, I really wanted to acknowledge the important leadership that Georgia Close, our Head of National Learning, has played in bringing this conference together. Unfortunately, Georgia is not being able to be here as she fractured her ankle over the weekend and has been bedridden in hospital awaiting surgery all week. So she has been managing remotely from a hospital bed and giving us direction from afar. And the team here have done an absolutely extraordinary job improvising, stepping in and collaborating to make sure that they can continue to bring you an extraordinary conference that's really deeply meaningful and really represents the commitment that we all have to learning and to First Nations practice. So huge thanks to you, Georgia. And I also particularly want to thank the extraordinary work of Aaliyah J. Bradbury, who's been the program producer for this conference. And she's been working closely with Georgia over the last 6 months to bring this together, very much with the guidance of our First Nations engagement team. So many thanks to Ian and to Bruce and to our First Nations curators, and very much to the voice of Crystal Hurst, who's really ensured that we've been culturally respectful, considered appropriate, and very much First Nations led in the program. Programs like this also don't happen without an enormous operational team and energy behind it. So many thanks to the on-site and digital production team. So to Julia Mendel, Justin Watson, Jennifer Dunstan, Frankie Gould, Maggie Kennedy, and to our lead artist educators, Crystal Hurst, Annika Ramayan, Tess Barker, and our off-site team providing access support and streaming to you, led by Adam Bannister, but also to the wider programs team who've provided support throughout the program. Particular thanks to Sally Brand, Sam Cooper, and also Justin Watson, who worked to bring you the Betty Churcher Memorial Oration last night, and to Jessie England, Adrian Bogue, and Joe McCarthy have also been delivering the program on site and off site for you all. It's now time for you to enjoy a lunch break, to connect with colleagues or to have a little bit of a rest, or connect with art. You are going to be joining us back online if you're here for the full program at 2 p.m. For those of you who are on site and participating in our workshops this afternoon, please go directly to your workshop locations. If you're not sure where to go, please speak to our very friendly staff down in Gandale Hall, who'll be able to point you in the right direction. But for now, enjoy your lunch, your breaks and your reflections, and we look forward to seeing you this afternoon. Thank you.